All right, hello and welcome to this briefing. We are taking a dive into governance, artificial intelligence, and human intelligence in the AI era. And what I would like to do today is to share with you the month of February. I do executive briefings once a month, and it's really in order for us to start having the conversations around what is required, what is necessary, and what is available, and how we basically can ensure. Bear with me as I get my whole life together here. As we can ensure that we are ready for the transition. As you know, 2023 is when we really start seeing artificial intelligence or large language model really take a forefront in the way that we conduct business, the way that we improve our systems and our processes. And so now, 3 years later, we're looking at three of the top jobs for 2026 being in this field, whether it's an AI architect, AI engineer, or an AI program manager. We now realize that artificial intelligence is growing with us and around us, and it's important for us as the humans in this space to ensure that we are ready for the transition. So today I'm going to talk about burnout as it relates to being a governance failure and not a personal failure. Now, if you think about burnout, for the most part, we've heard it whether we're in sports, science, business, academia, and in tech. We generally view burnout as something that is a leadership problem. But I'm going to talk here today about systems. And there are systems around us, through us, for us, and against us that are really here to show that burnout is now really a governance issue. And there are things that we can do as leaders of our agencies, regardless of what size, what position, however much power. It can be something that we can manage effectively. So I'm going to share with you today. So my promise for you today is you will get a clear strategy helping you understand how and why organizational effectiveness can be positively impacted by artificial intelligence. We can improve our execution, our systems, our knowledge, and our people by addressing the challenges of AI head on. And I'm going to show you how to do that without burnout being a construct that gets in the way. All right, so let's start with definitions. A lot of times people say AI, it's actually large language model, and they'll think that one application is the entire thing, and it's not. So large language models are different forms of technology and integrations that allow us to do things better. You've even seen artificial intelligence at the level of Google when you're searching for something. You've also seen artificial intelligence used in hospitals and in educational institutions. So let's talk about a couple of definitions that are going to be very important for us today. Governance. We're going to define governance as it relates to the AI space. We're going to talk about decision architecture and why an advisor like me uh, is important, and how what I do is different from what a consultant or a independent contributor or contractor may do. And so as we're moving through our agencies and having these different players and stakeholders around, we want to make sure that we're consistent in understanding what the definitions are and how they impact our people. Decision rights. We're going to talk about decision making within your agency. Even the person that you just hired yesterday has a decision tree. And we want to make sure that our leaders, regardless of their roles and responsibilities, are able to understand what their decision rights are, how to leverage them, and when to seek help. Okay. Then we're going to talk about operational cadence, capacity, and decision fatigue, because sometimes during eras like this, especially when transitions with leaders or tech, we find what we call decision fatigue. And that's where we are overusing or optimizing our people in a way that is not healthy for them. So I want to break down the first three definitions for you. So governance, as it relates to this brief today, governance refers to the frameworks and the processes, all right, that guide our decision making. It ensures that we have accountability in our organizations, transparency to all stakeholders, and strategic alignment within the organization. So whether or not you are a nonprofit, a for-profit, an association, a club, there is governance on every end. And so we want to talk about governance and understand how and why governance for artificial intelligence is imperative as we move through this year. The second definition that I spoke about is going to be decision architecture. So a decision architecture involves us having the design. How are we structuring our responses, our decision making when it comes to strategy for the new year, products and services that we offer, who we're going to onboard and hire, how we train our people, and also how we reset ourselves. Because all of this must be in alignment with organizational goals. And that clarity around those goals and the people within those systems are going to be imperative for us. So we got to make sure that our architecture is clean, consistent, and ready to be deployed at any time. And the third definition that I want to dig into before we get into this presentation is around decision rights. I told you that it doesn't matter if your employee was just hired yesterday, they have decision rights. And so understanding what decision rights are and what they are not is going to be key. So a lot of this information can be captured in employee handbooks, your employee workbooks, your leadership guides, your operational guides, your board charters, your operational, anything that you have from operational, your SOP, standard operating procedures. Those are all embedded in what we call decision rights. So decision rights by definition, they are the people that have the authority over various decisions within the agency, within your organization, within your institution. And so they have a role of clarifying goals and alignment with the mission, right? And the responsibilities of the parties, okay? That includes themselves. And so what we want to do when we think about decision rights is think about how efficient your decision making is and the rights of the people making those decisions, okay? It all impacts your operations, which ultimately impacts your FOP, your financials, your operations, your people, and your profit. So let's take our executive frame. Let's go back up to the 50,000 foot level. Let's talk about what governance leakage looks like. So I know we're all from different agencies, different size organizations, different roles and responsibilities, different trends that we're all adhering to. But when it comes to artificial intelligence, I want you to understand that burnout hits you. Doesn't matter where you are. Burnout hits the creative space. There are creators that refuse, and you can see this in the world of entertainment. Well, they just say, you know what? I'm going to give up for a while. I'm going to change. I'm going to take a sabbatical. I'm going to do all of these things. So let's talk about how this impacts your organization and how if your best employee, your prized leaders decided to take a sabbatical because they're burned out, how it really impacts your agency. So first and foremost, understand, just like the title here, burnout is a systemic issue. It's a systemic failure. It's not because your leaders cannot handle the mess or the workload or the change. A lot of times burnout starts with simple things: slippage in attendance, participation, deadlines, habits, and what I call habits and attitudes. So habitudes, if they begin to present differently, even slightly, that is the beginning of burnout. So it's important for us to understand it at the executive level and be able to reframe it as a governance issue and not a people issue. So the answer is not sending people to self-care retreats all the time. It's not let's give them a paid time off. Let's send them to the EAP or the employee resource program or assistance group that you have there. It is really about looking at the systemic issues around governance and decision making. So when it comes to decision making structures, if there are unclear roles, if there are shared roles, if there are power and influence, um, tension, that creates governance leakage. And so when we have an organization that is not addressing that proactively, what we find is organizational fatigue, which is tied to your identity as an organization, but is also tied to the disengagement of your leaders. So let's look at some stats real quick. 31%, this is the recent Gallup poll. Only 31% of employees are actively engaged in their work. That is down from 35. That is down from 37%. So what we're seeing is a downward trend, which indicates that we've got to really get some things together. So we know we've had the pandemic. We know we now have the introduction of artificial intelligence. What it's doing is making our people less engaged. So you'll hear language like, oh my goodness, they're taking my job. Oh my goodness, I don't know how to use this. And so people are checking out. So we want to highlight today ways for you, and I've got 3 tools that I'm going to share, ways for you to keep your team engaged, on task, mission aligned, clear, and without decision fatigue. So we're going to give you an opportunity to do that today. So let's highlight this gap, put a pin in it, and just understand that the gap in the workforce is impacting motivation and productivity. So if they are not engaged, that means work is not being done. If they are not engaged, it means you're losing money. How are you seeing that money? Look at your KPIs. What is your absenteeism rate? What is your turnover rate? What is your succession planning? What does your performance management scores, those averages, look like? These are all signs of engagement or lack of engagement in your organization. And what we also know, when they're not engaged, they're more stressed. Do you know that in a recent study, 76% of employees experience some significant workforce or workplace stress? And we also know that conflict, whether there's tension between 2 leaders, 2 departments, 2 organizations, a client, and your agency, that stress is directly tied to your people, which ties you to your profits and your productivity. So we've got to look at this as a governance issue, and what things can we do around decision making to make it better, more clear, more succinct, and more manageable. So let's talk about this AI era changes. In the last 5.5 years, we have literally seen artificial intelligence catapult us beyond what we were doing as organizations, even before the pandemic. Okay. And so what we got to do is understand that those dynamics have changed. And what we also know is that AI integration is here, people integration is here. So there's a gap that exists that must be addressed. So what we're going to do is talk about 4 parts of this change that I really want us to understand and be willing to address. Now, I'm not going to say all 4, but if you can pick one area, find that one area and make sure you understand everything about it and how it relates to your organization, how it's impacting your people, how it's impacting your operations, how it's impacting your productivity, how it's impacting your profits. All right. So the first thing is going to be velocity. Rapid decision making demands. People want it yesterday. We have what I call the crock pot, and well, we're beyond microwaves now. It's the air fryer crock pot society that we live in. Not only do we want it faster, quicker, sooner, cheaper, we also want it with the most detail ever. So now, even when you go into doctor's offices, have you noticed a trend? And maybe this is you. People will tell you what they think is going on, and they have zero qualifications or training as a doctor, but they know cancer better than you, for example. That velocity is not going to slow down. Artificial intelligence, in fact, I created this PowerPoint from the notes from my head that have been in here for 30 years and was able to create this PowerPoint in less than 3 minutes. That's something that we couldn't do 5, 7, definitely 10 years ago, right? Second is volume. There is an overwhelming mix of data everywhere. Primary data, that's data you have collected, use or not use. Secondary data is the data that's all out in the ecosystem, whether in the forms of YouTube videos, webinars. They're on LinkedIn. They're in. They're on TikTok now. They're in your institutional closets, if you will. So the volume of data is overwhelming. And what we also know in that volume is that there is a lot of false data and data that is out of date. And so, how are our leaders navigating that? Because AI, people, processes, policies all say we need to move quicker, faster, more often. We need to be able to change on a dime. And just the honesty is, we're not able to do that. Okay, we're asking humans to be machines, and that will never be. Okay, so we want to keep the human human. All right, so we'll talk about that overwhelming data influx. So I want you to look at your organization. Do you have a lot of data? Yes, no. Is it primary data or is it secondary data? Meaning data you've gathered is primary, or secondary is data you've heard or received from other outside sources and resources. Then I want you to also think about the ambiguity that's associated with it, right? A lot of times we have unclear outcomes of what we want in our agencies, what we want in our businesses, what we need and demand from our leaders. Okay. Like, for example, they may say, hey, we need to have a metric around resiliency. We need to make sure our leaders are resilient. Have we defined that for ourselves? Have we defined that for the leaders that we are evaluating? Have we allowed them to participate in that evaluation? Those are things that are more transformative that I want to encourage you to think about. Because when you have human intelligence with artificial intelligence and you mix the two, what you will find is what we call the BATNA. That's your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. And that agreement is the one that you, your leaders, and your large language models come up with. Now, the last piece of this AI change that we're going to consistently see is called visibility. Artificial intelligence is at the forefront of everything. We see millions and millions of dollars being raised, shared, data centers coming up, going up everywhere. We're seeing people, job postings, school curricula is changing because we want to get in front of the AI wave. But the wave is going to continue almost at the level of a tsunami because there's a need for transparency. I work in this space around artificial intelligence and governance. And as a capacity builder, as an entrepreneur, as a professor, I am deeply, deeply entwined into many different spaces, even on the policy level on Capitol Hill. Okay. So understanding this era has brought all of this drudge and debris up to the shoreline. And we're out there now picking these pieces up and trying to figure out ways to deal with it. But what I want to encourage you as a leader in your agency is to make sure that you stay visible and to make sure that you stay authentic and transparent. If you don't know something, tell the people you don't know. If you need help figuring that out, we have large language models, we have AI integrators, we have consultants, we have colleagues in the space. I don't like to call them competition, but go and see what other people are doing. Follow those folks. Take those classes. In fact, Harvard right now has an entire AI program that you can go and get training for free from one of their resident professors. Maybe that's something that you can open up to everyone. Because the thing is about these changes, they are not going anywhere and they're going to continue to hit. So we've got to make sure we understand that the velocity is that. Decision making and deciding on a dime is now deciding on a half of a penny, which is going away. The volume is going to continue to increase because there is a demand for information, and the information overload is high, which makes ambiguity high. And we know that leaders do not navigate ambiguity or manage the gray well. So we're going to have to be super intentional about what we are willing to have visible, be transparent about, and also be intentional about. Okay, so let's go a little further down this road when we talk about this leak and this governance leak map. I want you to map your organization. So think for a minute. Okay, there are some clear failures in your agency. There's something right now that is burning you up as I'm talking about it, and you know exactly what it is because your brain went to it, just like a GPS. So I want you to write that one thing out. What is the one thing that you would like to change in the next 30 days? Something you know cannot go to December 2026. Write that down. And then I want you to put a circle around it, just like we would a die, like we're going to drop a pin. I want you to drop a pin on it, circle it, take a picture of it, type it, screenshot it, and keep it close. Because as we go through these sessions, the fourth Thursday of every month, I want you to bring that list out. I want us to work on that one thing because what we know is things leak when there is a breach. And so we talk about critical failure points for you. The thing you circled on your map, the thing that's leaking in your agency right now, is it something around a lack of clarity? Is it something around decision making? You know, I have had clients over the last 30 years who failed because they were not good decision makers. And decision making comes with an element of risk. So I want you to write that risk score down. What does our decision making look like on a scale of 1 to 10? What does our risk score look like when it comes to decision making? So when you think about your risk score on a scale of 1 to 10, if people are really good at making decisions, you have a 10. If people delay, drag their feet, or avoid a lot, you might be closer to 1 or 2. Be very honest with that because this is going to help you understand your governance leak map, your GLM, way, 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 way more clearly by the end of this presentation. Second, governance leaks come from insufficient engagement from stakeholders. Stakeholders can be board members in nonprofits. It can be corporate board members as well. It can be governing board members. Hey, it can be the actual government. And we have seen that full circle, out loud, on every platform possible. So what does engagement look like for you and your stakeholders? And if you really want to get into this, list all your stakeholders and give them all a score between 1 and 10, with 1 being oh, poor, non-existent, to 10 being excellent. What is their engagement number? Okay. Next, I want you to look at on your map for this one thing. Overwhelm. I call it overwhelmingness. So overwhelmed decision-making capacity comes from the fact that I, as a high-achieving female who has driven millions upon millions in organizations for other people, sold billion-dollar brands, billion-dollar systems, for me, decision-making is overwhelming because I always have to do it. All right? So think about you. I want you to be on the third bullet. Your decision making. If it's overwhelmed, give yourself a 10. You're like, oh, it's so much. I'm up to here. They say I'm up to my eyeballs. Now people say I'm underwater, right? If it's 10 and you are high on overwhelm, put a 10 down. And this is just you, no one else. If you are not overwhelmed and you are managing things well and feeling really super great about it, put a 1 or a 0. This overwhelmed decision making is going to show you how and where you can pinpoint your impact on these other things that impact your leakage map. And then the last 2 things is what we call an inconsistent operating cadence. So what I mean by that, I'll just call it the meeting indicator. Right? When I was in corporate as a chief impact diversity officer, I had an average of 6 to 8 meetings per day. They weren't set by me, they were set by other people, some of the stakeholders. So I want you to think about Is your operating cadence consistent? Yes or no? Now, this is going to be a macro level. I want you to think about the entire organization, and you rate yourself on this between 1 and 10. 1 is our cadence is not that great. It's going to be a 0. Okay? We make ad hoc meetings. We call each other on the weekends. Let's be honest. I talked about that transparency. On the other end, if you're going to give yourself a 10, that means your operating cadence is in sync. People show up where they're supposed to be, when they're supposed to be there. There is no overwhelm. And listen to this, there is no pressure to be perfect and be present everywhere. Only you know your culture, okay? Only you know whether or not people are being muscled or voluntold into the work. So again, 10, if your cadence is great, your operational cadence is great, people are happy and thriving. 1, if there is room for improvement. The last thing is failure to address decision fatigue. So this is acting like we don't see the elephant in the room, like we don't see the snake on the shelf, like we don't see the cheetah running through your house. Okay, it's that. What does decision fatigue look like for you? If it's super duper high for you and the agency, 10. We're tired. We're burned up. We're overwhelmed. We're over it. We're anxious. If it's low, 0 or 1, because that means it's not a problem for you. There is no failure to address the decision fatigue. You address it well. So in this governance leak map, I want you to add those numbers up, and it's going to give you a score. And that score is your governance leak score. And so for you, it's going to be hyper important, or very, very important, or uber important for you to understand that in order for you to address the transformative things that need to take place in your agency before this AI integration literally consumes your people, is to make sure you know your score, understand your score, and are willing to do something about it. We're going to go through those real quick. So I'm the founder and creator of what we call the emotional sustainability. You may have heard emotional sustainability, but the emotional sustainability adds all of the other things, right? It's the infrastructure space. It is the muscle behind it. It is the bones of the whole system. And what it does is it focuses on what we call the long-term resilience, okay? That comes from competencies, connections, construction. Remember, we're talking about the infrastructure piece. It comes from your culture, the culture of your organization, and your people within the organization, right? It comes from your consistency as a leader. So when we talked about the cadence, the adaptability, the risk factors, that's all a part of this emotional sustainability piece that we look at when evaluating your agencies. And it also looks at your conflict scores, because you as a leader have a level of conflict, but so does your organization. If you're willing to stretch yourself to the max every single day, and that's how everyone feels, that says a lot about the emotional sustainability of your agency. Because long-term resilience comes with systems in place that are in alignment, clarity around the mission and the goals of the people, your finances, your policies, and your profits. And then last, you've got to understand that the governance framework is the beginning or the foundation of emotional sustainability. So ensuring that you're adaptable and dynamic as this thing comes in, it's going to be way easier than if we're chaotic, risk adverse, non-communicative. So these are 3 tools that I want to share with you today, and we're going to choose one, and I want you to practice it over the next 7 days. So the first one is this. The first tool is called the Decisions Rights Reset, DRR. If you can roll your R, it's great. If not, I understand. So Decision Rights Reset requires you to do this. You must clarify the roles to enhance governance and decision-making in your agency. So after you've given yourself a score, these are the 3 tools. One of the 3 two of the three, or all three that I need you to implement. And so if you're going to use the DRR, the decision rights reset, there are four roles. And what I will say is someone has to sit in each role. And once you have someone in each seat, you can have two or three or more in a box, but every seat must be filled. Understood? So we can't have five people want to be the driver and no deciders and no doers, because then that keeps us out of alignment. We can't have three advisors, two deciders, one driver, and no doers, because again, that would be an idea, and we're not we're not into just idea generation. This is not a think tank today. This is an action incubator. All right, so the decision rights reset starts with this. One person's going to be a driver. At least one person's going to be a driver. They're the one that initiates the decisions. So a lot of times in an organization, my clients will have this be a person who actually has what we call decision-making authority. So that's someone who is generally a salaried employee who has other employees under them, okay? Or a frontline supervisor, okay, in a production setting, okay? That driver initiates decisions and is willing to do that. So they know their element of risk. They know how to communicate, what to communicate, how often to communicate it, and how to report on what they're communicating. Okay. That person will initiate decisions. Listen to the key word, initiate. The second person on this DRR is the decider. This person finalizes the decisions. So say if you've got a people leader who is the driver, then the director or the chief will be a decider. Okay. That person finalizes it. That is the COO, the person who holds the budget. It might be the line supervisor, and maybe the drivers in their particular role is going to be the people who work for them on lines, for example. Okay. Train was a client of mine, and I did that. So their individual workers were the drivers, and the deciders were the frontline supervisors, and those are the ones that I trained. And their role was to empower the drivers to do their work without being overly tasked and overly managed. Okay? Advisors. This is someone who provides insight. This a lot of times can be at a director level, senior manager's level, depending on the size of your agency. Again, it might be a supervisor, right? Those advisors. In a nonprofit setting, that advisor may be a board member. And it is imperative that you train your board and your leaders. And I like to do it at the same time. My clients who do this find themselves more in alignment, and their communication is better than without it. Because sometimes board members, even on corporate boards, will feel that their role is to arbitrate, and it's really not. So there's some language there that needs to be addressed, right? But that's what an advisor does. They give insights. They don't make the decisions. They advise, right? And then the doers are the people that implement, and they do the work. They go and they implement the work. So the driver can initiate it. Hey, we need to change this system over here because it takes us twice as long to get widget A out. Great. They'll take it to the decider, their plant supervisor. Plant supervisor say, yep, that's good. It can save us X amount of dollars, X amount of time. Let's go and initiate it. And then what they'll do is go and get the doers, right? The doers will be the person that actually have to do the work, and the advisors are QA, quality assurance, or quality assurance, or their quality captains. They have QC and QAs, and they're the ones that will say, okay, yep, it was done well. Metric A, metric B, this was better. Great. That's a decision rights reset. The second tool I want to share with you is called the 3-filter tool. So I always want you to think about the funnel approach. And if you decide to do this one, I like to use these in the strategic arena. So when I'm doing annual reports, when I'm doing annual reviews, when I'm doing stakeholder analysis, bringing new board members in, hiring new executive staff, the 3-filter tool is the one that I prefer. But you can choose any or all, okay? But here's the 3-filter tool, and I want you to think about it like this. Top of the funnel is assess the risk before making a decision. So this is the person who's taking in all the information. And so a lot of times, I do have people, even at the frontline supervisor level, will be a person that can use this tool. They go and gather all the facts. They interview all the leaders. They watch all the film. They look at all the reports. Okay, so that's assessing before we make a decision. Then, after you've assessed everything at the top of the filter, Then you, on top of the funnel or filter, then what you're going to do is evaluate the potential value of the outcome. So this is part of the reverse engineering piece. So what we say is, all right, I got all this information. What do I want to do with it? What is my desired end goal? I've got 15,000 pieces of data in my head. All of it is not going to stay. So, what am I really trying to prove or disprove? So, that gets into statistics a little bit. What's my hypothesis? What is my statement? What is or is not? And we may say, hey, we're losing more employees than we think. And maybe after gathering the data, you're the one in the filter tool saying, nope, um, our rates are less than 5%, which is industry standard, right? So that's evaluating the potential value of your outcome. So do we need to know that? What does that mean? If it's good for us to look at absenteeism or exit reviews or um, hiring and firing practices, that's evaluating the potential value of your outcome. So if your outcome is to have a new onboarding process where you have fewer people to attrit, great. It would be good. You can evaluate that value. Okay. If it's something else, you get to modify it at the middle of this funnel. Okay. The last piece, and this is the bottom, before it comes out, before it hits the ground and becomes law in your organization, the three filter tool asks you to ensure adequate capacity for execution. So I'll tell you the hard part. And I was a leader who did this once. Went and did a whole bunch of, I love tech, obviously. I love tech. And I went and I was in a very large nonprofit. And I was going through their data, right? And we needed a new system because people were housing data in 4 or 5 different ways. We had it on paper, we had in Excel spreadsheets, we had it in Word documents. And I was like, what is this? And that included donations. And so what I did is I went and assessed. And then once I got to the middle of the funnel, I said, what we want is a tool we can use where we can manage our fundraising, our donors, our program participants, our staff, our trainings and our developments in one system, right? So in order to ensure that capacity is great once we're ready to execute, you got to ask the right questions at the middle of the funnel. And for me, I didn't do it. So had I used this tool and created this tool back then, we would have started with the right system. But what we did learn in the middle of the funnel, and once we looked at the outcomes we were looking for, we weren't getting them. So we had to go back into the top of the filter, assess our risk again, bring in all the information plus what we learned from the broken system, and find a new one. And they're still using that today. So that's how the three filter tool works. Now, the third tool I want to share with you today is called the boundary script. And I always tell people, hold boundaries, not grudges. Organizations, hold boundaries, not grudges. People, hold boundaries and not grudges. Why? Because boundaries establish clear demarcations in the sand. It's a clear governance rule, governance policy, governance outcome that you want, and it helps you with decision making. If I have a boundary in place and I say all RFPs, requests for proposals, have to be in by March 1st, that means I'm not accepting anything on March 2nd. Got it? So that boundary script is a tool that you can use to help enforce or reinforce the governance within your organization. How do we do that, Dawn? It's a 3-script approach. Number 1 is going to be define the roles clearly. All right. So when you're looking at establishing a boundary around an employee, what are the rules? What are the roles that they're supposed to do? Because what you'll hear is get out of my lane, stay in your lane. This is my neck of the woods. All that comes from an inability to communicate effectively, which is a governance issue, not a burnout issue, not a leadership issue. Okay. The second part is to set the decision parameters. So again, it could be time, it could be talent-driven decision parameter, it could be a financial decision parameter. For example, you may have a big event that you need to put on, maybe the annual golf tournament. And those parameters are important because I can't go over budget before we execute. Because if that's the case, whatever we raise is going to be going to the debt and not the agency. Okay. So sometimes I've seen it used in effectively in the nonprofit space for leaders who have budgets, leaders who have people. In education, it's for their classroom. What are your decision parameters? If someone is on an IEP, an individual education plan, how often are we going to hold those meetings? Is it going to be once a year? Is it going to be once a quarter? It's going to be based on what you and the school and the family came up with. All right. So again, clear decision parameters. And then the third part of the script is to communicate those boundaries effectively. I like to say communicate in at least two ways. Number one for me is write it down. Number two is say it. Number three is email it to someone else. You can also incorporate it into a mission. You can incorporate it into your core values. You can put it on a thank you card. You can stamp it and put it in the sky if you like. These are all different examples of boundary scripts. And so those boundary scripts allow you to hold yourself, your people, your rules, your clients, your AI, artificial intelligence boundaries together, right? So you may say, for example, we have artificial intelligence and we have a paid ChatGPT account. I'm going to ask that you use this only for work. So that's good. Setting a role was clear. Hey, you are an employee here at this agency. You have access to this tool. That's a paid account. It's an enterprise account. You set the decision parameters. You can use it. However, you can only use it for work-related things. So don't be out here creating games on work time because you have violated script number 2. And then communicating those effectively. Make sure they're in the handbooks. Make sure they're on the walls. Make sure they're on the badges. Make sure they're in the emails. Make sure they're in the signatures. Make sure if you have someone on a performance improvement plan, it's on the documentation that they sign. It's in the e-signature. It's in the contract. So you understand how this one works. So you've got these three different, and I'll go back, these three different tools that will help you define governance based on that thing that you circled that we're going to work on in the next 30 days. I'm just going to ask you to practice for 7 days and report back to me. Text me, email me, let me know what came up for you, what worked, what didn't. Are you going to use the decision rights reset? Are you going to use the 3 filter tool? Or are you going to use the boundary scripts? It's up to you. Because what we know is there is engagement rate potential. So we're currently at 31%. How about you have the ability right now to influence your leaders? And when you look at leadership as a resource, what we know is it significantly impacts employee engagement. So you can go from 31 to 75%. Shoot, you can go from 31 to 50%. And that is a win. That is a win because you're demonstrating that you are a supportive management team. You're demonstrating authenticity, intentionality, transparency, and you are living it and walking it and sharing it. And when it doesn't work, being willing to revise it is also part of governance, all right? So that could lead to a 75%, up to a 75% increase in workplace satisfaction and productivity. I had a client, LDV, in the financial services space who did that very thing. They were across 4 states. They're in what they call the non-sexy industry, right? They're in debt collection. And their founders and leadership team of 8 was very much a monolithic group of leaders who were out of touch. And so what we had to do is to take that information. So I'll show you the one I used for them. Actually it's more than one. I used the 3 filter tool first because I looked at all the data. I got the surveys, conducted more surveys outside of the work, looked at their data over time, primary and secondary data. Also looked at what was going on in the industry, what the trends were for organizations like theirs. I read all the data from the industry and what was happening in the industry. And guess what was going on? The pandemic. So not only could people pay their rent, they were also having to call people they couldn't pay their rent that needed to pay their bills. And how do you have leaders in your organization not carry the weight of that by themselves? So we used the three filter tool there. Then I said, what's the outcome? What do you really want from this? And they said, Dawn, we want more diverse leaders. We want to be able to recruit younger leaders. We are here as a bunch of old people. They said they're a bunch of old white people. And they were. Their entire team was a team of 8 was white men and white women, all identifying as heterosexual, male and female. And so they knew that there was a problem. They knew that there was an opportunity and they knew they could do something about it. So then we identified their outcome. They're like, we want to be leader led and leader led from the bottom up. And so we revamped all of their whistleblower, their policies and procedures. They're lawyers. So the fact that they wanted me on their team, I was really honored, first of all. I was like, oh my goodness, this is so great. But you guys are all lawyers. So I'm kind of scared here. But anyway, we went ahead and said what we wanted, and we wanted a leader-led organization. And I will tell you, Hillary, as co-founder, female, amazing leader, who's been doing this for over 20 plus years, she said, Dawn, I have no idea what I was doing before this organization transformed into who we are now. They have an entire team of leaders within their agency, widely diverse, that are over everything from complaints internally and externally, all inclusive activities, employee engagement, leadership engagement, community outreach, and also training and development. So that 3-filter tool works. And so when you have burnout reduction, you will see it work well, and you will see it show up the first year. The example I gave you of LDV, they were seeing results within the first quarter of using the systems. All right. They were able to create effective governance strategies for their agency, and they only have to get new information annually, and they refresh their entire organization annually. All right. This can be done because burnout is real. Like I told you, it's about every leader everywhere. No one is exempt. And so we really want to make sure that we understand how to use it. So I want to ask you to take one of those 3 or all 3, plus the item that you identified as your target for the next 30 days. And I want you to do a 7-day governance patch. So this is what we call the litmus test, okay? Over the next 7 days, I want you to take what you circled, and I want you to go to your organization, and you're going to use one of the 3 approaches. Remember? We'll go back to it. You're going to use a decisions rights reset, where you're going to find out who the driver is, who the decider is, who the advisor is, and who the doer is as it relates to the things that you circled. Or you use the 3-filter tool, maybe something more strategic that you want to deal with. And you're going to start assessing. You're going to figure out what your outcome is, reverse engineer. We want this, so I'm going to look for this information in the ecosystem and the other drivers that maybe you're not even looking at. And then you want to ensure capacity. So once you get to the funnel, who's going to own it? That's the ultimate question for the 3-filter tool. Or you can use the boundary scripts. Define a role, set a direction, and set the decision patterns and parameters clearly, and then communicate those boundaries. I have a client that's a multi-million-dollar nonprofit that used the boundary script. And you know what we use it on? Employee development, leadership, and learning. Because they found that there was no way for the people internally to get the skills that they need. So they first transformed their culture from one that was more of an autocratic, it was interesting. I don't even know the words for it, but they went from this very, very staunch, stoic, fear-based leadership style to a transformative style where even the leaders at the top were getting trained on the exact same things as everyone else with their own needs built in. And we use what was called their job description, their assessment, their resume, and their interview. And so they looked at their job descriptions, they looked at their resume, and they looked at the work that they've been doing. They created a heat map. So everything they feel good about that they can do with no problem was a green. Things that kind of like, yeah, I'm cool with it. It's on my job description. It's not on my resume, and I really don't know how to do it. It's kind of yellow. And things are like, yeah, it's on my job description. I'm not doing it. It was red. And so then what we did, we set a meeting and talked through those things and said, what do you want to envision for yourself? And they were able to communicate those boundaries and those needs clearly. And they're an entirely new organization. And now the leaders are the ones that pull their leadership into their performance reviews instead of it being more of a prescriptive thing that is a top down. Okay. So let's see if we can get that number up. Let's see if we can improve employee engagement and productivity by doing a 7-day patch. Because what you will do, it'll allow you to have the governance weaknesses exposed. Now you can really put some things in place before AI comes and is forced upon you, or maybe integrated in a way that maybe your leaders can't keep up. So that's upskilling and reskilling folks. We can foster resilience by giving people the things that they need around their confidence, their competencies, their connections, their culture, all the things, their capacity. That's this emotional sustainability, because that in turn helps their decision making and their ability to be successful. Because the more they feel comfortable about themselves, the better governance you will have, because they'll bring a problem to you instead of hiding it. All right. So now I want you to pause the video right here, and I want you to go ahead and put that in action. Take one or more of these tools and apply them. What are the applications? Write it out. Say to yourself, this is what I can do, cannot do. This is what I need. This is the person that can help me. This is who I'd like to present this to. So again, if you're doing it that way and thinking as big as you possibly can about how to address that one thing, you will end up using all three of those tools to get you into your botnet, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement, and be able to roll that out in your organization immediately. So when you complete your 7-day test, you now will be able to see that the demand cycle has the opportunity and potential to be improved. You can have a 60% reduction in your decision cycle time when you organize yourself around what it is, who it is, what needs to be done, and is it in alignment anyway, right? When you have those conversations, now you can be agile, you can be responsive, you can be transparent, you can be consistent, you can be inclusive, because in this model, using one of those three tools, you now have the ability to transform your space and do it with data. And that is one of the things that will allow you to adapt faster to artificial intelligence and meet the needs of your leaders who need human intelligence. I thank you for your time today. This here is my screen. I'll leave it up. You can get onto my newsletter. I send a newsletter out every Tuesday with tips like this for you and your leaders, things that you can share, tools that you can use, places where you can plug in. I also have retreat information, because I do have a high achievers retreats for those lovely people who need a rest, because at the top, it gets a little lonely. So a lot of the women at the top get together, and that's what we do once or twice a year. Okay, so we've got a retreat coming up. I'm going to invite you there. My social's there. My website is there. Let me know how I can support you and your team. I've got a couple of folks out for pilots, and I do this pilot twice a year where I will take an organization and run them through my models for free. And what we do is we build a case to ensure that across these different industries, the tools that I'm sharing with you, which are evidence-based, are useful and effective. All right. Human intelligence in the AI era is what I do. It's my jam, and I thank you for being here today. We'll see you again in March. Thank you.